Antel is Trinidad's most reliable and technically experienced ICT company, providers of quality structured cabling, Cat6 data fiber, and power cables. We also stock cabling infrastructure basket-type cable trays for server rooms and data centers. Antel also installs and maintains video security systems including cameras, alarms, and electronic entrance locks for businesses and residential properties. Call Antel 674-1406 or 783-9250.
Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. This is probably the most anticipated show that we've done in quite some time. And I'm sorry if I'm looking distracted. It is just that I have a responsibility to send the link to the 25,000 people who follow me on WhatsApp. So, and that's complete. Tuesday, January 4th. January 15th and the furlough, which is basically the issue that everybody wants answered. Will public servants be locked out on the 17th? Can they do that? Tonight, the gentleman we're going to have this conversation with tonight is an internationally certified human resource management and industrial relations expert. He is today the principal consultant of Millennium Human Resource Consultants and Associates and a senior industrial court advocate who represents both employers and sometimes workers through trade unions and their representatives. We are going to be opening the phone lines at some point during the show. And we are saying from now, when we open those phone lines, if you get through, listen to us on the telephone that you call on and not try to hear yourself on whatever device you're watching the show on. There is a natural delay and it's a couple minutes. And because we get hundreds of calls, we are not going to be able to waste time guiding you through that process this time. By now, everybody should know. Also, we would like you to say when you call, just give us where you're calling from. Beatam, Diego Martin, Carnage, San Fernando, Tobago, wherever you're calling from, Canada, just give us that before you speak. You don't have to give your name. We also rather not answer blocked calls because the last two times I did that, it was Fitzgerald Hines and nobody enjoys that. Without further ado, Mr. Stephen Matteson. Good evening, Stephen, coming to us from your kitchen, I see. Welcome. Welcome.
Good evening to viewers. Happy to be on your show tonight.
My friend, I have them anticipating your appearance on this show, you know. So we're going to get some big numbers. Basically, everybody is asking me this. I am not answering this question because some things I like the experts to speak on. January 15th, is that a Friday? I want to check my calendar. Because January the 15th is the deadline. That's a Friday. So that means Monday the 17th, which is my birthday, Monday the 17th is when we will know if the government is going to lock people out. And the question everybody wants to know is this. If they do not want to get vaccinated and they do not want to disclose their vaccination status, do they have a leg to stand on? First and foremost. The second question I'm going to ask you, so if you segue into it, fine, is can the government furlough people and have them employed but not pay them? And finally, the Attorney General, the now embattled Attorney General, has told people that if you're furloughed, you effectively abandon the job. Jump in and take it from there.
Okay, so to the first question, can the government do follow through on what they say they were going to do on January 5th, on
15th.
Monday,
Yeah.
January 15th? The answer is yes. They can't do that. And
Legally?
they can't, yes, legally, they can't do that. And they can't do that because we are currently, this regulation is currently, was currently put in place under an emergency regulation. And under the act that governs health services in Trinidad and Tobago, where there are arrangement, where there are regulations in those acts, in cases like pandemics, emergency situation, yes, the government can make laws, and we call it laws, that can have that kind of effect. So the short and long answer is yes, they can do that, but there are other, you see, if they do that, they still cannot claim. Remember, our laws in Trinidad and Tobago, and we talk about furlough. So I want to first deal with the issue of furlough. Furlough is really a foreign term. It's not a term we use it interchangeably in Trinidad now, but really we're talking about layoff. So furlough is a term they use in the US. And of course, the US, different states will have different laws that govern them. But in the US in general, they operate their employment system. They operate under an employment system called employment at will, which would usually give an employer the rights to terminate you without cause. In Trinidad and Tobago, the situation is a little different. We have laws, we are governed generally by industrial relations practice, certain common law, and we just don't have the authority under the law to terminate persons without cause. So if I am to segue a little into what I would have heard the Attorney General said, I think that in a significant way, he was misguided when he tried to marry furloughed with abandonment, and to say that you can terminate people. Furloughed and layoff, while they are used interchangeably and they mean something similar, kind of different in different jurisdictions, furloughed really is really layoff. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have several common law, several judgments passed down by the Industrial Court from as far as 1978, which speaks to furloughed, and in fact, a particular judgment, ArcelorMittal judgment in 2015, really give guidance as to what is layoff and what really layoff is, and how a layoff can be administered in an employment situation. So layoff really is a temporary suspension of the employment contract. And there are other judgments which would have spoken to the length of time you can possibly do that. Now, when you suspend employment contract for a period of time, let's say you suspend employment contract for whatever reason, in most cases it will be done where an employer is experiencing some kind of shortfalls in revenue, and they have evidence. They would speak to the workers and they would let the workers know that, hey, we can't pay you for a period of time. We will be sending you home on layoff. And that layoff, according to the court, according to judgments in the court, and there are several, will speak to the amount of time you can do that for. So generally, it's 3 months. Now,
I want to ask you one question to that, just to that.
Yeah.
does that apply here then to the public servants? If you furlough them, can the furlough only last 3 months?
But I don't want to talk about furlough because you see, furlough, I've already addressed. We do have
In
furlough
this
in our
context, it's not the same
right?
thing. In this context,
It's
it's
not the
not
same
what
thing,
they mean.
right? Recently, they start talking about furlough in England, but in England, where furlough was spoken about, it meant something different from what we are when we talk about layoff. It meant something totally different. In which case, workers would have been paid for a period of time, a percentage of their salaries, and that kind of thing for the time they were not on the job as a result of the particular condition. In this case, COVID. Now, we can't really talk about a 3 months period because COVID, in most cases, I would have sent home workers in about 7 different companies in 2020 on furlough, on layoff. And in most cases, we had the regulated discussions with the workers, and we told them that, listen, your terms and condition, your tenure remains intact when you come back. And at least 3 months after, because we didn't know before for these companies, we didn't know before. And at least 3 months, within 3 months' time, we will contact you and we will let you know what your position is. Because that is what the judgment, that is what the common law dictates. It says that you are not, when you furlough, when you lay off workers, you are actually not terminating them. Layoff is not redundancy, layoff is not retrenchment, layoff is layoff. It is a temporary suspension of your terms and conditions, and it means that your tenure remains intact. So if you lay me off for, say, a year because of COVID, you must call me back at some point in time to let me know what my position is, one, and two, to say whether or not you are now taking a position where you are going to retrench me and pay me my retrenchment benefits without loss of tenure for the year that I was home. And that is what is recommended in this situation. Now, I want to say something about, because the Attorney General will have convoluted this matter in a significant way. And when I heard the news clip, I had a serious problem with it. Furloughed or layoff, in this case, is the temporary suspension of employees or employee terms and condition or contract. Now, it does not mean, it relates nothing to being terminated. It relates nothing to being job abandonment, as he would have suggested, because he would have convoluted job abandonment with furloughed, and job abandonment really is on the workers' initiative. Furloughed or layoff is on the employer's initiative.
Yeah, but he playing fast and loose with terminology there, because he is trying to infer that you are only furloughed because you're not vaccinated, and that if you get vaccinated, you'd come back on the job, so that it looks like you have a choice. I mean, it's a Hobson's choice. It's a choice, but it's not a real choice. It's coercion in every sense of the word. But he is trying to make it about that choice. And if you do not make that choice under these new terms and conditions, then you have effectively abandoned your job. Can he get away with that in a court of law?
Okay. No, you can't. He can't get away with that. In the first place, let me just say that in Trinidad and Tobago, under our industrial relations system, if you can't bring the two as one. Abandonment takes a particular complexion in the court. If I have abandoned my job as a worker, the onus is on the company to first write me to find out where I am, to get a status on my position, whether I'm coming back or not, why I'm away from work. If you didn't get me then, call me. If you didn't get me on calls and record those calls, then send me registered mail, send a vehicle home to check. I could be in the hospital, I could be probably in jail, anything. So it is not a situation, abandonment does not come in there in any way. That's for starters. If you send me home because I didn't take the vaccine, so you tell me when I take the vaccine, and I will tell you about some companies that would have done that, not even in a safe zone situation would have done that.
Can he insist that you have a choice? That's what he's trying to craft. Can he make that argument?
Well, the whole idea behind all of this, clearly, Philip, is for persons, I don't know if it's either to scare them or to coerce them to take the vaccine. But there are persons who just would not be taking the vaccine. And it does not mean that your contract is frustrated. Because contract frustration in common law is a common law principle. And in common law, any second-tier law student would know that frustration would usually come about if it becomes pointless to continue the contract, if it becomes impossible by some intervening situation, it becomes impossible to continue the contract, or it becomes illegal to do so. And I will deal with the position of illegality just now. But the thing is, we cannot say that the contract is frustrated in this case, because there are remedies that one can use. You could tell me work from home. I am of no risk to anybody if I'm working from home. You could tell me that you're paying me off, you're paying me my pension. So all these things, all these are remedies that you cannot avoid if you decide to go that way. Because you cannot then go to the court and say that there was nothing else they could have done because the person didn't take the vaccine, so they end up being terminated. And the fact is, once you tell me to stay home, remember, a contract is deemed to exist whether we have it in writing or not. Right. You were paying me, and I was doing a job. So if peradventure you decide to send me home because of, say, I didn't take the vaccine, then you would have to say you stop paying me, then technically you've constructively dismissed me. And if you constructively dismiss me, I have a claim. Whether or not you did it for whatever reason, under whatever regulation, there were remedies that you could have exercised before you took the decision to send me home.
So you are saying that the first step they should have taken was mitigation of the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated. You could mitigate the situation, but you are also saying, and I need to get this clear for the 100,000 people who want to know, that you are saying that their rights and employers' obligations under the terms and contracts of their employment cannot be superseded by this public health regulation, and it cannot be superseded by the government's intention to furlough and force people to vaccinate. You are saying, clear that people's rights stand.
I am saying not in the way that they seem to be suggesting. Yes, we can tell you under the regulations that we have created a safe zone, and if you are not vaccinated, then you are not allowed to come to work. Yes, they can do that. But I'm saying there are remedies to prevent the contract from being frustrated. And those remedies are, just give you two. Those remedies are, you can decide in this case to let me work from home.
Right.
Or you can decide to pay me off for my 20 years or my 30 years of working. You could decide that.
So
but you cannot do. Right?
Furlough is not a layoff. If you furlough me and you are not continuing my job, I have a claim, regardless of the circumstances under which you've interrupted my employment.
Once it does not meet the test in contract law, which it becomes pointless to continue the contract, impossible to continue the contract, or illegal to do so, in my opinion, it is not, you cannot do that.
Well said. Well said. People are going to ask about Deborah Thomas Felix's opinion, which was the gold standard for the past 22 months. People have been referring to that as the government inch closer and closer to trying to coerce people into vaccinate to operate and now vaccinate to keep your job. Deborah Thomas Felix's opinion that you cannot change a contract that is already enforced without both sides agreeing. That still stands.
That has been my position from day one.
They're going to want you to say more.
Yeah, that has been my position from day one. If I have a contract in any setting, I have a contract with you, and something happens, and that doesn't bring the contract to a position where it is frustrated. You cannot unilaterally make or put conditions that varies that contract without I first agreeing to that. There must be a discussion, and we've been saying that from day one. You should have some kind of discussion. Every time an employer calls me to advise on a situation like that, I advise that we have some kind of dialogue. And there are companies today, and one of them in particular is Digicel. Digicel would have had some workers who have been working from home for the last 15 months. And now they are telling those workers that you have to be, they're not in a safe zone, according to the government regulation, but they are telling those workers that they have to be vaccinated to continue working from home. Now that, to me, if that is not asking for trouble, I don't know what is. Right? You have an ex-company called Hella Security who told some workers that they cannot come to work if they are not vaccinated, who are working on some location, and then when they didn't come to work, they tell them to abandon the job. But that will be decided in the court.
We have, and to those watching, Ian Griffith, the head of our legal affairs unit, is joining us right after the phone calls bit. So you are going to get your opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Matheson. We're trying to make sure that we ask all of the questions that were sent to us and the questions that are circulating this issue. So let's not be redundant and ask him the same questions. I'll give him an opportunity to encapsulate the position where the furlough funding is concerned so that you understand that you have rights. He has said that you cannot frustrate a contract and that any variation in the terms of the contract requires agreement on both sides. Ian today spoke to me about one of the citizens union members is an employee of a pest control company, and his job in the company does not bring him in contact with human beings. He deals with rats and roaches. He comes on locations and puts down all of the devices and the traps and everything and takes the old ones and go. That's his job. They have not rostered him for 3 months because they've created a vaccinate to operate scenario. And he now is in a limbo because he doesn't want to get vaccinated. His position is he never deals with human beings. His job is just to go to locations, put out traps, and leave. What's his situation?
Well, his situation is the same as those that I would have identified before. One,
and he's working with them for about a decade. Sorry, I was supposed to add that. He was working there, he's working there for about a decade.
Let's look at the logic of all of this. The persons to whom he is going to put down rat poison and that kind of thing, are they vaccinated? Can he ask them if they are vaccinated?
He doesn't interact with humans at all. Right. He doesn't go and knock on a...
So, and this is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, you cannot frustrate the contract if there are remedies. So, one, he's not operating in a safe zone. There's no law in Trinidad and Tobago that says that you have to be vaccinated if you're not operating in a safe zone. So how could you then tell me, by your own law anything without I having a contract which specifically says that. How could you then tell me that? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
We're going to take a break in a couple minutes to open the phone lines. I want to ask you, just in the interest of clarity, so that we don't get asked the same questions over and over, because you know the questions that they're going to want answered. And I just want to hear you say again, before we open the phone lines, Satish, we'll take a break, a brief break, and when we come back, the phone lines will be open 682-2110. But you are saying, so we're wrapping this point up so that all those who are waiting to dial the number to ask you this question, that if the government furloughs workers on between the 15th and the 17th of January, those workers have rights under their contracts and under the law.
Yes, they do. They have rights under their contract because clearly, in most situations, the furlough, the layoff that the government may be trying to effect, there are remedies to solving that. You can tell me to work from home, and you can create a situation where I can work from home all over the world. They have done it. And in fact, we have been doing that before we had the vaccine. So to tell me now that nothing has changed in the workplace, the only thing is that you want me to take a vaccine. So, and I have the supreme rights over my body, except I'm a minor or I'm physically incapacitated. So you can't tell me that I have to take a vaccine unless you have a law that says that I have to do that, and I'm not seeing that happening. So yes, you do have a right and you do have a claim.
Okay, so to all of you viewing this now and later, and this is a live show, so we're going to be taking live calls. If you watch this show on the rerun, please don't call in during the call-in segment because we get that. Satish, we'll take a quick break now and come back with the phone lines, and you could post the number for them on the phone now. Everybody stand by.
Unique Woodworking Trinidad Limited and Unique Lumber and Construction Guyana Incorporated are premium manufacturers and exporters of high-quality bifolding sliding and pocket door systems, fire-rated doors, windows, operable louver shutters, hardwood floors, staircases, architectural moldings, and toughened laminated glass. Unique Group of Companies also supply kiln-dried greenheart, mahogany, cedar, and teak for both residential and commercial projects, locally and regionally. Our logs are cut and shipped by Unique Lumber Guyana and dried in our computerized kiln at our factories facilities in Trinidad. Visit our showrooms to see the quality, which makes us unique.
682-2110. During that ad, we started getting calls. The lines are open now. If you have any further questions that you would like to ask Mr. Stephen Matheson, you can do so by calling in 682-2110. You can also WhatsApp questions to that number, 682-2110. And here we go. Hello, good evening, you're live.
Good evening, I'm calling. Is this the talk show?
Yes, and you're live. Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening. You're live.
Yes. I'm calling to get some information. So I am an RET worker, right? Listen, I know that we spoke about working remotely, but my job is a hands-on job. In my instance, what would be the best thing to do? Because I am not going to get vaccinated as well. And I have made up my mind to walk away if it should come to that.
Thank you very much. Listen off air and he'll answer you.
Let me attempt to answer that question. The fact is, besides working from home, there are other remedies. If you've been working, say, for a number of years, then you would have accrued, if you are sending me home for no cause of mine, I'm not being vaccinated is not a cause for you to send me home. So if you're sending me home without a just cause, and I have been working for some years, then we can talk about paying me off.
Settlement.
Right?
This is a settlement issue.
Giving me a settlement under the RSBA or some other, some other means like what you would do under VSEP or whatever. But to say that I am no longer an employee, or to say that I am now terminated, or I've terminated myself or abandoned my job, that really that's a long
shot. Does
not
apply. Does not rise. So to the nurse who called, simply put, if they can't come up with any other remedy to relocate you from their safe zone, what Mr. Matterson is saying is that they have to separate you from your job and pay you off. Yes? Hello, good evening, you're live. Hello, good evening, you're hearing me, you're live.
Hi, good evening. Yes, I'm hearing you. Calling from Belmont.
Yes, caller.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Matheson. So let's say, for example, an employee tests positive for COVID within the time frame of the day before the furlough. So let's say, before the furlough period is supposed to begin, and you have to wait 3 weeks to be able to go get the vaccine. What would happen in a situation like that? Is it that they will? Is it that you have the ability to continue going to work within that time frame or after that time period passes? If you are still waiting to be vaccinated, let's say you do decide to go and take the vaccine, can they tell you to stay home if you are still waiting to be vaccinated?
I suppose in situations like that, I'm supposing in situations like that, certain concessions would be made or should be made, because you are on sick leave. Technically, you are on sick leave or leave that will be paid by the NS, and therefore, to now tell me that because I wasn't able to take the vaccine at the time, or I wouldn't even advise taking the vaccine if I get over and I now have natural antibodies in my body. But that's a question for you. But in any case, it wasn't possible at the time to take the vaccine. So to say that I am not taking the vaccine, or for them to suggest that you are not taking the vaccine and not paying you as a result, that too is a problem, or it's going to be a problem.
Is that a situation that you could call exempted? You're exempted because you're waiting on the vaccine. If that person is thinking of getting the vaccine, they need to be able to show cause that they can't get it the next 3 weeks or the next 4 weeks or whatever. Yeah? So that's communication with them.
That should be one of those conditions.
Hello, good evening. You're live.
Hey, pleasant good night, Mr. Alexander. Pleasant good night. I can't remember the
Stephen Matheson.
brother name.
Stephen Matheson.
I'm a T&Tech employee, and I have two scenarios. One, T&Tech is saying that they want to implement this and make it a safe zone as well for employees. But is it that the nation will not be able to come and pay their T&Tech bills if they are not vaccinated? That is one. And secondly, let me say everybody take the vaccine, and then somebody in the workplace are vaccinated should come to work and spread COVID-19 in the workplace. Could we then turn around and sue the company because they're pushing vaccine and forcing it, saying that who not vaccinated is at risk? But let me say, who vaccinated give workers COVID, where they deem safe now, could they now be held accountable? Thanks, Mr. Alexander, for your time. I will listen to feedback. Thank you.
Okay, now I want to say this before you even try to jump in there. That is a matter for the lawyers who are going to be joining us later on this week. It really is not tied to employment and separation of employment. But if you want to add your opinion to it, you're free.
Right, but the thing is, a lot of what he would have indicated there would have really indicate or give some credence to the oxymoron in the whole argument. Because if I am vaccinated fully vaccinated and everybody around me is fully vaccinated, then the very thing that we are trying to protect, when we start spreading it around among ourselves and people dying and that kind of thing, it really negates the whole argument about people being vaccinated in a condition like this. So really, and the question as to, is it that the person who are now coming to pay their Tiantec bills or whatever, for those who may be walking in to pay, I don't know if people still do that. I mean, I will usually pay my phone bill from my telephone. But for those people who still do not have that kind of technology available to them and have to walk in to pay the telephone
I'm taking
bills,
that personally. Has gone pay in St. James. Has gone pay in St. James.
You know, is it that if you are not vaccinated, you are exempt from paying your bills? That's the question.
It will become all as a large conversation. Hello, good evening. You're live.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, you're live. Your questions for Mr. Matheson.
My question is, I work for state media.
Could you speak up a little bit for me, please?
The contracted period right now is yearly. And I'm just concerned in the sense that if I refuse to take the vaccine, what grounds do I have in the sense of if they decide to change terms and conditions in the next upcoming contract?
How long have you worked there?
Over a decade.
And your contract has been renewed automatically every year?
For the most part, yes.
Okay.
In the beginning, it was like 2 and 3 year contracts. And over the last few years, it's been yearly contracts.
But it automatically renews?
Well, in the first place, there's nothing like automatic renewal. He's a worker, right? He has successive contracts over a period of time. Nothing has changed. The job continues to exist. Therefore, he has a reasonable expectation, and therefore, he's a worker. And there are a lot of judgments again on that as it relates to contract workers, because I'm hearing maybe a hint that he might be thinking that because he have some fixed term contract, he's on a 1 year contract, if they could now change it. No. You are deemed to have a contract, you have a normal contract of service. And because you have that normal contract, you have a normal employment contract.
So you say that once it was renewing automatically, he is an employee. He is no longer separated from the contract.
It has nothing to do with, I mean, there's a judgment 21 of 2015. That was Bayview versus Tobago House of Assembly. If you read that judgment, you get that judgment and you read it, you will see it explains that. But let's so I'm suspecting that he's asking the question, if at the end of that 1 year contract, that last 1 year contract that he's on, if they can now vary the terms to say that he has to be vaccinated. The answer to that is no, in my opinion.
You just help a lot of employers there who have been thinking that they could keep people on a perpetual renewing 1 year contract, that they on a 1 year contract. Hello, good evening, caller. You're live. Your questions for Mr. Matheson.
Hello, good night.
Yes, you are live. Please ask your questions for Mr. Matheson.
Good night, gentlemen. Good night. I want to applaud what you're doing. Good job.
Thank you.
I would like to know something. Now, I believe in other than the ministry that I work in, there are other ministries as well where they have employees on short-term contracts, right? There's the long-term contracts in terms of the 3 year, 5 year, where you get sick leave, vacation, all that. And the short-term ones are 3 months and 6 months, where you don't get those benefits.
It's very.
And at the end of the 3 year and the 5 year, you get gratuity, but the 3 year and the 6 months, you don't get any gratuity. So what I'm asking is that, does the short term, the same terms and conditions, would it apply to the short term as the long term, as it applies to the long term, or is that a particular situation? Is that totally different?
When you say a short term contract, how short a term?
Huh?
How short a term is the contract?
The
short-term contracts. It has 3 months and it has 6-month contracts.
How long have you been working there on those short-term contracts?
Personally, me, over 3 years.
All right. Stephen, is that the
Okay.
same thing?
Okay, it's the same thing. Really and truly, you know, one of the things, even the government do it, and they lose in the court all the time, right? They try to use contracts to keep especially political appointees. They try to use these 1-year repeating contracts, especially where the job exists, it continues to exist, you have a reasonable expectation. You then, when government change, we send you home and we replace you with other people doing the same thing, you know, that kind of thing. Those things the court have spoken over and over about it. So the question as to whether or not they can suddenly change your terms and conditions, they could do that, but your contract, that kind of contract could become voidable before the court, because the court will see through the intent of the contract, and if the test was not met, then the employer will have a problem.
Hello, good evening, caller. You're live.
Yes, sir, good night. What about daily rated permanent workers?
Daily rated permanent workers. Thank you, my friend. Daily rated permanent workers. What's that? You're working by the day? No, I'm trying to understand. What's that mean?
No. I mean, you find that happening a lot in like the RHAs and, you know, that kind of thing. Daily rated workers. But really and truly, the government have and unions like the NUGFW would have a mold for that. Now the thing is, even those workers, those kind of workers, have rights, because there are people who are calling themselves daily rated permanent workers who have been working for 20 years, 25 years. They have rights, and they
Court
have
recognizes
rights.
them as workers with rights.
Of course, they are workers.
Hello, good evening, caller. You are live. Please ask your question for Mr. Matterson.
Nice. My name is Lorraine Constantine Tobias. I am from Paramin, and I'm asking a question that there are teachers that have not been upgraded, and there are also people in the teaching service that are acting in positions. Can this affect their upgrade? Thank you.
All right. No, before you answer, well, you see, that's it. She's asking a question, but this is industrial relations advice they're seeking. This is not specific to the vaccine. So she wants to know if this furlough thing could affect people being upgraded. I mean, if you have the job,
once you fall in the government so-called safe zones, yes, it could affect you. And as I would have said in my opening, the government would have all the rights and are able to do what they plan to do on the 15th. They can do that because the regulations protect them. The emergency regulations allows them to do that. The question is if your contract will be frustrated. That's the question. If they can absolve themselves by terminating you from their responsibility under the contract. That's the question. And in my opinion, I don't think they can.
So upgrades and all of that will still apply. The government,
yes,
the employer has a responsibility to the terms of the contracts. And this,
Phillip.
Stand by. All right, you're live now. Ask your question for Mr. Matterson.
Yeah, hello.
Yes.
Right, so I'm trying to pick as an employer, right? Can I, in my business, hire unvaxxed persons? And if I decide to hire both unvaxxed and vaxxed people, and they're aware of that policy, and they agree to it, would that be okay?
All right.
Let me ask you a question before you hang up.
Oh, gosh, I gotta bring him back.
Okay, well...
Let me bring him back. Because I just let him ask the question and go. Let me bring him back.
No
You have reached the
No, we're not getting through. All right.
The question, let me answer the question both ways. If you are operating in a safe zone, it may not be advisable to hire persons who are not vaccinated at this time. Although it may seem discriminatory, it may not be advisable to do that because the government has already made that a safe zone, and it means that you will now have to show that the persons working under you are vaccinated. However, if you are not working in a safe zone, it really doesn't matter who you hire. You can hire vaccinated or unvaccinated, and you will not be irresponsible because there are a lot of persons who have decided not to take the vaccine for all kinds of personal reasons.
I think that
and not hiring persons will be seen as discriminatory.
Caller, you live?
It's like something like again, Mr. Alexander. The court, while all citizens refuse to take the job and stand firm, the court system in Trinidad, where this PNM government has these persons in the court in limbo in renewing their contract, and it's a scary thing, but I trust that you start putting pressure on these persons in the court system to do the right thing when all these matters start to come before the court.
Well,
thank you.
But I want to answer that question. Now, I put as an advocate in the court, I have 150% confidence that the judges in the industrial court operates impartially and fairly on both sides. So the question as to their tenure, because we do know their tenure is usually in question. Judges in the industrial court has no tenure. It's unlike the judges in the other high courts. They have no tenure. They are hired by the political directorate, really, and they have no tenure. But from my experience on both sides of the pendulum, for the employer and for the employee, and for the trade unions, they have been operating thus far very, very impartially and fair. And I want to give them that kudos.
Well done. Good evening, caller. You're live. Ask your questions for Mr. Matheson.
Hi, good night. Service Commission Department has public servants who have been working 10 years, 14 years, 18 years and not yet appointed, which means permanent. What does this mean for us in terms of the furlong and the benefits of an employee who is actually appointed in the post?
Well, again, there are judgments that speak to, I don't want to go back too much into the contract issue. Once you are a worker, you have certain rights under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago and under the industrial relations practice. And the layoff would apply the same. And it should apply the same. I'm not too sure if all workers are not necessarily represented under the PSA. So you can seek representation under different trade union if you choose to, if you are not a PSA member, and you can get redress in areas where you feel being treated unfair by any one of these policies.
So I want to ask you this. There are workers in Trinidad and Tobago working on 2013, 2014 salaries. So people asking these questions piecemeal. I'm asking this to you. The terms and conditions of all contracts still stand. Furlough and safe zone notwithstanding. The employer has responsibility to the employee, and the courts have to see that for what it is. Is that your position?
Yes, that is my position.
We're going to take one more call. Hello, good evening. You're live. Your question for Mr. Matheson.
Hi, good evening, Phillip. You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. As a water worker, right, when they first initially tried to bring this vaccination thing in place, they gave government workers a certain time off for Christmas till the New Year. But as water workers, they said we couldn't get it because, we are essential workers. Now, does that, having done that, negated that aspect of it, does that mean now that the vaccination aspect is void too? Because, you can't want things both ways, right? We can't get these time off that you were going to give because we're essential workers, but then that means it shouldn't be able to apply vaccine sanction basically. So I don't know.
You've answered your question. You've asked and answered your question. However, it's still a matter of whether or not your intention is to get the vaccine. Because if your intention is to get the vaccine, you could just go and get the vaccine. But if you are exempted and you don't want to get the vaccine, well, then you have no problem.
We're getting a lot of calls. We have to take a break from the calls. We have to take a quick break because we're going to be bringing on the head of our legal affairs unit, Ian Griffith. And I guess, we're going to have a conversation. You will decide if we're taking any more calls after this. But I think that we're starting to circle the issue, Stephen. I don't know. We're not getting fresh questions, really. The issues remain. And the point that you keep stating is that workers have rights and that this safe zone idea cannot unilaterally change or vacate those rights. Yeah?
Yes. What I'm saying, when we use the furlough is really a foreign term used in the US and more recently in England. But while it is used interchangeably, there are some minor differences in what the definition relates to. So, for instance, in England and Wales, furloughed over the last 2 years would have meant that some workers would have been home for a period of time, but they would have been paid a percentage of their salaries. And they didn't lose any terms and conditions, that kind of thing. So in the US, as I have always said, in the US, they operate under a different system, a different employment system. So they operate under employment at will. It means that a worker can be terminated anytime without cause for whatever reason, except, of course, it is something that relates to discriminatory or sex-oriented or something like that.
But they have rights.
They have rights. In Trinidad and Tobago, the situation is a lot different. We have laws that protect workers in all the areas the AG have spoken, even in abandonment.
Let's take this last call here from Janice Lemon Creaky. Good evening, Janice.
Hi, good night, Phillip, and to your guest. My question is, what would Mr. Madison indicate to people who go to work on the 17th and they're told that they cannot enter the compound because they're not vaccinated? What does that employee need to do in terms of whether keeping a record of when they go to work, that they're being sent back home, so that if they do decide to take legal action, they can have a record of what transpired when they went to work. That they did not abandon their job.
Well, as I said, as we would have indicated before, the first thing, and you would have asked a question and answered it too, the first thing is that you need to go to work.
So I went back home, or I camped. Right? I camped outside the building.
The first thing is you need to go to work.
Stephen, just hold on 1 second. Janice, two of you speaking at the same time. So you want Stephen to guide employees as to what they must do or could do so that it does not come across as if they abandon their jobs, yes?
Correct.
He will answer you.
Whether they should turn up for work, if they are sent back home, do they go to work the next day, let the company send them back home? let them continue on that route because they would need to show proof. Well, look, I did go to work, but I was not allowed to because I'm unvaccinated.
All right, he's going to answer you. Listen up here, okay?
Let me answer that question. The first thing is that you need to go to work. You need to show up for work. And know that abandonment is on your initiative. So if you show up to work, you didn't abandon your job. The next thing is for anybody to consider that you have abandoned your job, they have to first prove to the court that they would have done their part, which is to call you, registered, send you a registered mail, go home by you with a vehicle, check on you to see where you are. All those things, all those tests you have to pass. Your employer have to pass those tests first before they can consider that you would have abandoned your job. So yes, the answer is go to work. Let them physically put you out, right? But go to work.
Stephen, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back to this. All of you watching, is going to be Satish and the team are advising me that we're going to be doing an extended show tonight. Don't go nowhere. We're going to be extending. We're bringing on the head of our legal affairs unit of the Citizens Union, Ian Griffith. Stand by. We're taking a short break to organize that and come back. Stand by.
Antel is Trinidad's most reliable and technically experienced ICT company, providers of quality structured cabling, Cat6 data fiber, and power cables. We also stock cabling infrastructure basket-type cable trays for server rooms and data centers. Antel also installs and maintains video security systems including cameras, alarms, and electronic entrance locks for businesses and residential properties. Call Antel 674-1406 or 783-9250.
Unique Woodworking Trinidad Limited and Unique Lumber and Construction Guyana Incorporated are premium manufacturers and exporters of high quality bifolding sliding and pocket door systems, fire-rated doors, windows, operable louver shutters, hardwood floors, staircases, architectural moldings, and toughened laminated glass. Unique Group of Companies also supply kiln-dried greenheart, mahogany, cedar, and teak for both residential and commercial projects, locally and regionally. Our logs are cut and shipped by Unique Lumber Guyana and dried in our computerized kiln at our factories facilities in Trinidad. Visit our showrooms to see the quality, which makes us unique.
Right, so we are back, and the issue tonight is the 15th of January, the government's intention to furlough. I have been asked to remind viewers, Victoria Foods Grab and Go, 218 Food, if you would like to be on the WhatsApp list to receive a menu, send a WhatsApp to 4712888, Victoria Foods Grab and Go, at 14 to 17 Victoria Square, Port of Spain, the largest supplier of all the best brands of hot food, hot and cold food, cold, delivery to anywhere in Trinidad, delivery to Port of Spain and environs, free of charge, 218 Food. We also have Ian Griffith, our head of the Legal Affairs Unit of the Citizens Union. And we have a million, literally, figuratively a million, WhatsApps. We have a lot of questions via WhatsApps, but a lot of them are duplicated. But I want to, Satish, we have Ian in the building. We can bring Ian in. Ian and Stephen. Gentlemen, good night, Ian. You could say your good nights and let me get back into the guile.
Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you very much, Phillip, Satish.
You were listening off air to the exchange?
I didn't miss anything.
So, so you see the level of anxiety in the society where this safe zone thing is concerned.
Correct. All right. So, as most of the audience would know, Phillip is a weatherman of words, and he normally showers me with certain accolades. So, I want to clear up two issues immediately. I'm not an attorney, and I have spoken to persons, and they have also offered to ask me to send the invoice. So that I want to clear that up. In terms of the citizen union, the word union has been also conflated. We are not a union in the traditional sense like you would know of the OWTU, Transport Industrial Workers Union, Bank Insurance.
We're not a trade union, we're a union of citizens.
Not a trade union. So therefore, those of you that are, and the words Phillip used earlier, are anxious, sometimes approach a citizen union thinking we are that. But what we really are for this show, although there are many ways to express what the citizen union is about, and I would just describe it in the context of what you call the flavor of the month, furlough. We are really a grounds-up organization that is designed to be a voice for the voiceless and to build walls against institutional bullying. So that's 2 points I wanted to make on the onset. In terms of the anxiety, I could basically say to you 100%, every person I have liaised with or contacted the citizen union I've spoken with are all anxious, nervous, and at their wits' end in terms of their job security and all the attendant issues that go along with that, paying your rent, mortgage, your car loan for your teeter. They don't own BMWs. They're very nervous. And Mr. Madison was very articulate and clear in allaying most of the fears, but the anxiety won't go away because we all know, and in speaking to them, we do know that employees and their agents, quote unquote, are very vociferous and very proactive in trying to implement the government's policy. I don't want to make this a political issue, but it's almost remnant of the Hutsis and the Tutsis. Somebody you've been working with for decades will barrel down on your shoulder to ask you for your vaccination card and if you can bring it in predating the 15th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th. We have spent a lot of time trying to navigate that situation, and maybe Mr. Madison could address that if it's within his purview, that while employed, for those who are still employed on location at the moment, you've been asked to complete these forms, and I believe it's designed to create two groups. We want to know who is jabbed, and we want to know who is unjabbed. The anxiety comes up. If I were to provide the information that I'm unjabbed, I would seem to end up in a camp that will be targeted in all the ways possible, notwithstanding what Mr. Martin has said about the courts and his opinion of the judges, although they don't have tenure. I am basically reiterating anxiety in about 4 different directions and 5 levels. So it appears to be redundant, but that is the apprehension that the employees, workers are coming to the Citizens Union with. We are doing our best to address those concerns. In terms of the title of Head of Legal Affairs, and my disclaimer, not an attorney, that is just to tell members of the public that the Citizens Union is fortunate to have attorneys who have made themselves available to us to provide guidance. And it wasn't the intention for this matter specifically. It predates the flavor of the month. So there are a few attorneys in the country who want to give something back to society. They are available to us on behalf of the members of the Citizen Union. We interact with them. Sometimes it's not necessary for the Citizen Union member to speak to the attorney. We can do it on a rare occasion, and it has not occurred yet, where we would then ask the person to liaise directly with the attorney to resolve the matter. Obviously, it's going to, in a case where it's protracted. So I just wanted to get a few things out in terms of what the Citizen Union is, our role, the support we have from attorneys at large in the public, Needless to say, you know it's a fraternity club, so do not call and ask for their names. We are not going to put it on the air because they want to work very discreetly in an altruistic and a most fashionable word that has been used a lot, patriotic manner.
I want to jump in here and add, this is important because we still have to pay the bills. The show is brought to you by Ramsaran's Dairy Products and Millennium Human Resource Consultants, among our many sponsors. And we would like to thank both Ramsaran's and Millennium for their contribution to tonight's show. I want to ask, gentlemen, we have some interesting WhatsApp questions that we did not answer in the phone-in segment. And I want to, if you're okay with me throwing them out to see if we could address them quickly. Because
Philip, before you do that, I want to just address a question that our good friend here would have asked about the rights of a worker and his medical records.
Yeah, I was just not going to ask that.
If you were seeming to ask that question.
Yeah.
The answer as to whether an employer can ask you for that is yes. An employer, in most cases, when you join a firm, you would have to fill out an application form. And on that application form, as a condition precedent, you'll be asked about, just like an insurance company will ask you about your medical condition. If you have ever had surgery, you have ever had any, depending on the kind of work you do, that would relate specifically to that. And that is important to know that an employer could ask questions like that. In relation to your vaccine or vaccine status, there are circumstances where employers can ask for that, and we would have dealt with that in situations where you are operating in safe zones and that kind of thing. But in general, my opinion is...
But you said earlier, you are working in a company that was not a safe zone. It is now becoming a safe zone. You did not sign a contract.
That's where I'm going. Now they are great. That's the gray area. In my opinion, and I've seen the police association, welfare association, has put out a disclaimer, an advisory on that. In my opinion, if you do work in a safe zone, you had an existing, you've been working for 20 years with a company, I really don't see the reason why you'll be asking me for my vaccination status.
This question is an interesting question. In the case of the Coast Guard and other law enforcement, they are telling workers that they signed in the agreement to take vaccines. When the workers said yes, but not experimental vaccines, the reply is a vaccine is a vaccine. Now, this is a gray area. It is a gray area. Because this is not, none of us here are medical professionals, but the question from the position of, because law enforcement personnel are still ultimately employees of the state. And they want to know, they said they agreed to take approved vaccines that we've all known about for years and decades. There's a lot of unknowns with these vaccines and people scared to death of them. And they want to know if they can classify this as a vaccine and force you to take it under the existing terms of your employment.
Well, to answer that question, that is not necessarily a complicated question, but there are regulations that governs those kind of that governs like soldiers and that kind of thing. So yes, they are required to take certain kind of vaccines in circumstances where certain things may happen or certain kind of illness may be around and that kind of thing. if they would have said vaccine, and they are now saying no to experimental vaccine, I think, and I've always maintained that I have the supreme rights over my body, and except I am a minor or I'm physically incapacitated and somebody else is making that decision for me, I could say I don't want to take that. So especially where it
Even
is
law
an
enforcement?
Huh?
Even Coast Guard and soldiers and police and law enforcement people have that
But
right?
yes, they have done it. So yes, they have that right.
Somebody just wrote, the last caller's question, Janice's question, wasn't fully addressed, and he wants to know, the first step is to show up, and the employer needs to prove abandonment. But he wants to know what specifically must they do. People want to know, how far do you have to go to prove that you went to work? If they stop you by the door, they stop you on the pavement, how do you prove you went to work? You take a picture with the guard?
If they stop you by the pavement or they stop you, the guard put you out or whatever, obviously that might be considered in criminal law, that might be an assault. But
Call the
and
police?
I don't think, yes, the police can assault you, right?
No.
And I do.
The worker trying to go into the office that they work at, the security guard is stopping them. Is that something they could call the police for? The employee?
Yes. Yes, that you can stop. I work here. I have a contract saying that I work here. Now, if you put me out, you cannot then say that I've abandoned my job. You cannot then say that I have abandoned my job. Because abandonment is on the initiative of the worker, whereas layoff is on the initiative of the employer. So what you have done to me, and I've heard a lot of what you have done to me by not allowing me to come to work, by whatever means, what you have done to me, you have constructively terminated my services.
What proof do they need?
You don't need no proof. You already stated that what you was going to do, and on that day you didn't allow me to come to work.
So workers who show up to work, they have a contract with the company they're working for. If they're being barred admission, I had a drill down with this question because a lot of the questions on the WhatsApp pertain to this.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know. They want proof in their hands because Faris frightened them with this abandon the job nonsense. All right? So they want you to tell them, because they don't want people to say, but you never came to work when they went to work and they were barred from coming in and they have no proof of that. What do they do?
I think the right thing to be done by an employer is, if you have taken a position that you are not allowing me to come to work because I haven't taken the vaccine, you should give me something in writing. Most of them would have circularized some circular that if by, like in case of Digicel, if by a certain date you didn't take the vaccine, then you will now be on no pay leave and that kind of thing. You need to give me something like that, because that is the proof that you of your position. And if you have taken that position, then that's all I need. Because I didn't take the vaccine.
In the absence of any such correspondence, you show up for work and they don't want to let you in.
You should show up for work and indicate how you was not allowed to go to work. How were you allowed, the guard put you out or whatever, you take note of that. But you should go to work. In fact, I think you should go to work for every day for some days and ensure that at some way, somehow it is documented that you were on work, or you attempted to come to work and you weren't allowed to work.
So you could take out your phone and film it, take pictures.
You could do that too. Yes.
That is allowed. That is evidence for court?
Yes. Well, it is not necessarily evidence for court, but the thing is, yes, you can do that.
So let's say a ministry on Monday the 17th, 300 workers show up for work and the ministry is not letting them in because they're not vaccinated. And they're milling about outside, the media comes and cover it. Who does the roll call of those who were barred and all that kind of stuff? Should they organize themselves? Is that a responsibility of their union representative?
Yes, I would suggest in a unionized environment where there's an RMU, then the union would do what they should do, and the union should organize the workers in a situation like that and ensure that those workers, there will be shop stewards or whatever, those workers who came to work were present and they did come and they have evidence of it.
I think that's as far as we could go with that question, but I want to say that the Citizens Union will be on standby for our members. And on those mornings, you can call us and you could call me. My number is 682-2110. And you could call me for further clarity. I know I will have access to both Stephen and Ian and some of our attorneys to give guidance and support to our members where this is concerned. As an immigration officer based at Piarco Airport, unvaxxed, what do I do when I have to pass airport authority officers' checkpoints to proceed to my booth to deal with incoming passengers and where I have to sign a logbook? You can't even get to he can't even, or she, I don't know, can't even get to their place of work because they're being stopped outside the airport.
All that we are talking about so far hasn't happened. The first action is the government have to follow through first with what they say they was doing. It's not too hard to prove that you was constructively dismissed because the government has already stated it, and of course we are waiting to see what they will do on the 15th. So let them take their chances. The thing is, the question is, someone asked me, what happens to the period that I was away from work if they will be paid for it? You by arbitration at the court. I am suggesting, well, I can't say what the court will do, but I am almost certain that at the end of the day, you will be paid for the period you was away from work. And for those persons who are not operating in safe zones, and at whom was sent home for whatever reason, those persons, I can almost guarantee that those persons will, if their union would have asked for a reinstatement or whatever under section 10.3 or 10.4 of the Industrial Relations Act, I'm almost certain that they will be paid for every single day that they was away from work via reinstatement.
So I have something big to add, but I want you to say that clear again. And Ian, what I'm about to add falls in your remit here. But you are saying, without fear of contradiction, as long as the employee has a normal contract that they should be protected under, even if it's an unwritten contract, if the employer, whether it be state or otherwise, tries to vary that contract and bar them from employment without settling with them, that each and every one of those days that they are barred from their employment, they have to be paid for.
Well, let's don't convolute the matter.
I don't want to convolute, I want to get to them.
No. First, I want to talk about workers who are not in areas that the government has stated are safe zones. And there are a number of workers all over the country where companies have taken it on their own without good advice to ask those workers to stay at home without pay because they are not vaccinated. They don't interact with safe zones. They have been working at home since COVID, like in the case of digital workers. And those employers who took that chance, I am almost certain, without contradiction, that those employees will be paid for every day that they was made to stay home. In the case of this particular situation with government workers, I am not too sure, or I'm not too certain how the court would look at this particular situation. But what I'm saying, the contract has not been frustrated because there are remedies, and those remedies could mean that either you could pay me, you can deal with my tenure, my pension, or you can either deal with having me work at another location that doesn't require me to come to work. So, yes, there are remedies, and the court, I'm certain, will look at that.
One of the employees on our legal team just sent a WhatsApp via Satish that no criminal offense is committed if an employer puts you out. You can't call the police. At some point, it becomes no. Just now, before you throw your hands in the air, at some point, it becomes an issue with keeping the peace. At some point,
if you, I don't know what law that was. If you physically, you touch me, you push me out of the door or whatever, you would have assaulted me.
All right. So I think.
And if you assault me, you are exposed to criminal liability.
Ian, what do you think of that?
I concur.
So the 15 and the 17.
Right, Philip, I would just want to ask Mr. Madison something for clarification.
I just think that the 15 and the 17 going to be interesting days in Trinidad and Tobago. Go ahead, Ian.
Right. It's just to, again, it's back to the anxiety. So I just want to ask this question for amplification. Based on what the government is proposing to furlough workers without salary, what is the remedy those workers have subsequent to that action?
Subsequent to the action.
Court.
Yeah. And just to add one thing that you said earlier, on the balance of probabilities in the first instance, it's approximately 3 months and could be extended.
Right. Now, barring all that we've said before, there are also other legal measures that the government is banking on, that the government is probably thinking you may not be successful in doing, and that is judicial review. Now, the thing is, and I would like to hear what the senior attorneys have to say about it, because I know for a fact that there were some questions of judicial review in jurisdictions like Jamaica, in Canada, and they have been successful, right? Or they are on the way to success. So we cannot necessarily rule that out. There can be situations where individual citizen A or B can take action against this situation after the 15th, and legal action, and they could be successful in at least the court hearing, judicial review.
The joint trade union movement is calling on all public sector workers to report for duty come January 17th, vaccinated or not. Union heads held a press conference on the steps of the Attorney General's office in Port of Spain today to raise their concern about the government's plan to create safe zones in public offices. The policy calls for public sector workers to be vaccinated by mid-January or risk being furloughed. My God. I just lost that. Or risk being furloughed. Sent home with no pay. President General of the Oilfield Workers Union, Ansel Roger, and Joint Trade Union Movement, Ansel Roger, wants those who choose not to be vaccinated to also show up to work. I want to tell all workers, present yourself for work on the 17th and continue to present yourself. Let them deny you entry. I guess just what you're saying, Stephen. Let them deny you entry into your place of work, and that will be tantamount to illegal lockout. which the trade union and our legal team is waiting to deal with those issues. I repeat,
I'm thinking the same thing.
Do not set yourself up by staying home. Present yourself to work. And the attorney who sent the first bit that you responded to, you and Ian responded to, says, well, in situations where they're not unionized, I guess, because the union seems to be willing to take up the fight for those who unionize. All workers that are not, who have been sent home, who are barred from entering, in the absence of correspondence from the company to you explaining why you're being barred, the lawyers are recommending that they should write the company, the organization, requesting the authority, legal reason or law for which they are being barred or sent home.
Exactly.
So people have an abundance of advice tonight, and it should evaporate the fear that in cases where you are barred from your place of employment, it doesn't end there. It only ends there in the Attorney General's head. There is no abandonment of the job. It does not arise. It creates a new matter, and I believe that the courts are going to be very busy.
Very.
But I just want to say, yeah, Guardian.
Phillip, yeah, just back to you again, Mr. Matheson. I'm just posing the questions to you based on how they've been asked of us over the last couple of days. And it's to touch upon what you already alluded to, the medical information required of an employee at the commencement of his contract, so that the employee will know his medical condition, and there could be some risk associated with that. But in general, and I'm subject to correction, those are questions that are not normally asked of employees when you made reference to insurance. However, when you have a health plan, it is important to know and disclose that information to see if you have a pre-existing condition in which they will have to rate you appropriately for that, as opposed to denying you access to it, even if in your group plan. So my group plan could be $109 per month, but I came in with a pre-existing condition, heart, and mine could be $120. That's just a segue to this, again with the anxiety. When employees or their agents, HR managers, team leaders, whatever, supervisors are approaching employees, sending WhatsApp messages, sending out forms to be completed, asking basic questions, but getting to the most critical question, are you jabbed or not? I am of the opinion, not legal, you have an obligation to submit the form, but do you have an obligation to indicate your jab status? And I just want to add this for clarity for conversations going forward. It might be very important for us to differentiate the word vaccine from jab, and I think that would add clarity, because what we have here are investigative gene therapy medication or an investigative vaccine. Even, and I just want to go a little more to the left, when government officials use something as approved, it is conflated in one's mind with emergency use authorization. And I think we here should be very careful in words, because words have meaning. We should call it a jab or an investigative vaccine. We should not get engaged in any conversation where someone is saying, these are approved, and we should say, no, they're for emergency use authorization. The reason for that emphasis is, if you are asking me medical conditions, and you want to allude to the fact that I took polio and measles, which are vaccines, what is your objection to taking, quote unquote, the vaccines? I think the differentiating there is emergency use authorization of medication that was developed in 303 days as opposed to the traditional decade. So you have a little information there as to how long these medications took to be developed. I just wanted you to address that in terms of your comments about a requirement of an employee to provide medical information as opposed to providing information on a jab as opposed to conflating it with a vaccine, which we have all taken, and using the words approve when it's an emergency use authorization. I think those syntax are important for any dialogue.
Okay, Ian, and what I don't want to do is give the public the impression that a company on entry or at intervals cannot ask for certain kind of medical information. The fact is, a company could ask for that. On their app, most companies' application form will have that, and it is not only for insurance purposes. Sometimes, depending on the kind of job you're going to work as a diver, you would want to know something about your medical history. You're going to work, it depends on the job you're looking for, you're applying for. You would have to continuously update your medical records or continuously update, because the company may be indemnified by certain kind of policies for which you might be a part of or at some point in time, and therefore there are certain inherent risks also for occupational safety and health purposes. Now, barring that, let's drill down to COVID. Can an employer at this time, after you've been working, whatever, ask me to provide my medical records in relation to COVID at this time? There are gray areas in that. To me, that is my rights. And I don't feel, once I'm not in a safe zone, I don't feel that I would have to necessarily produce that to you. And you don't have any redress if I don't do that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There is another word here that you just used, and I think those are the words that we need clarity on, safe zone. But the government has pivoted towards quasi-safe zone. So, continue.
Well, under the emergency regulations, remember, in all statute, there are usually regulation. You can't put everything in a statute. So there are situations where under the law, the regulations will allow for the government to adjust certain things as time go by without having to go back to Parliament, which is what they are using right now. Only in an emergency situation, we have a pandemic, they are allowed to do that. And in which case, they have, in a sense, been allowed to interfere with your constitutional rights in some areas. And I'm thinking here that the whole point of all of this is to, at some point, create a situation where everybody will, in a kind of secondary constructive way, have to take the vaccine. Because first you are dealing with the public service, but then you may say to me, to access service as a citizen, I may need to be vaccinated. That's the almost certain, that's the next step coming if they are successful with this. So the thing is, we are Trinidad and Tobago. We are not the US. In fact, they can't even do that in the US. Right? They can't even make vaccination mandatory in the US. So I don't know why they're trying it here. But my point is that every single country that has become developed over time would have done so through some kind of revolution. And I'm not talking about armed revolution or anything like that. It is about time people stand up for what they believe is right. You cannot, I've always said it, you have the supreme control over your body. You telling me to put something that is alien that I'm not sure, ask Kenny J, he gone, that I am not sure about in my body, I have the right to say, no, I am not taking that. Right? I'm not doing that. And the quicker all the people who feel that they are not touched by all these things wake up and realize that they are slowly cutting away on your natural rights to stand up and do something about it, then it's going to happen. And when it happens, you'll have no say. It's just like the priests who sat and saw they came for the trade unionists, then they came for the socialists, then they came for the Jews, and when they came for him, there was no one standing.
And while I don't want to interrupt your philosophical waxing, I have another question to ask. Employees of the judiciary do they, now I don't know if you would know this offhand, do they fall under the same category as civil servants? And if so, or if not, what is their situation if unvaxxed?
Yes,
How do we
yes,
answer
they
that?
are. They are an arm of the state, and if I remember clearly, the government would have said that it is for public servants and other states that relate to or interact with the public servants. So yes.
I want to tell people watching the show tonight, notwithstanding Ian's disclaimers, in the absence of any other body protecting you, if you are not yet a member of the Citizens Union of Trinidad and Tobago, please feel free to take this number, 486-2888, and call bright and early tomorrow morning, or use WhatsApp and sign up with us, the largest activist organization dealing with this issue right now. And while we may not be a trade union, we are a large gathering of citizens standing in each other's defense, protecting against private and public sector abuse. So 486-2888, or you could keep my number, not for just everything that you get on WhatsApp to forward to me. Please, I have a million to try and get through tonight. But my number is 682-2110, and especially for Monday, because on Monday, I will be on standby in my office with attorneys and others to provide support to our members who have any difficulties with this idea of public sector safe zones. Ian referred to something, and I'm trying to get Satish to find it and put it up on the screen. This Ministry of Public Administration document, and any of the usual suspects hearing me, and if I say this now, I'll get a million versions of them, so maybe I'll just ask Kendall Maggie, if you could find that public administration document where it refers to quasi-safe zones. And a union asks, well, what's a quasi-safe zone? A safe zone is already a myth. What is a quasi-safe zone? Crickets.
Mr. Matheson, Mr. Matheson,
Crickets.
if I could interject here, it's quite possible you could say you don't know, you know.
No, well, the quasi-safe zone sounds to me like
and the reason I say that, the person who came up with the term probably doesn't know what it is, and for you to try to answer the question could be difficult.
Yeah, because just like the person who tried to answer the question as to furlough and the effects of it and conflated it with abandonment, maybe they're not too sure what a quasi-safe zone is.
Well, fortunately for us, that gentleman has a renowned legal career.
I'm not going down that road with Ian tonight. I know he joined bait for Faris. No, but seriously, the Ministry of Public Administration said in the closing of their document, I mean, it is a ridiculous document, that it is not a safe zone, it's a quasi-safe zone. What does that mean? If you stand up on one foot with one hand, with one finger in your ear, you're safe from COVID. How far down the rabbit hole? Because I was thinking today, not even Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice in Wonderland, could have envisaged these flights of fancy that this government is trying. More crickets. Satish, check the audio. Check the audio. More crickets.
I don't know what to say.
Phillip,
I don't know what to say. But if you want an example, go to London, go to the US, and see the kind of resistance that is taking place for even the hint of mandatory vaccination. What I know for sure is that Biden cannot do that.
Well, the federal courts stopped Biden in his tracks. So, and I think that should send a message and guide a lot of other jurisdictions. Ian, in our discussion earlier, I alluded to the member in the pest control company. I didn't name the pest control company, but I alluded to it, and Stephen said clearly your initial assumption was correct, and that for the 3 months that he has not been rostered, they still have to pay him. And I think you should send them a pre-action protocol letter informing them that they're robbing themselves because they're still going to have to pay this man.
Exactly. And all the companies that would have done that, once those employees, whether they have a union or not, and they will walk into any union and file a dispute under Section 51C of the Industrial Relations Act, I am almost certain that they will have their day in court. And when that happens, the court will rule that those workers go back out to work and they'll be paid from the day they were sent home.
Lima McLeod Wilkinson, deputy political leader. I want to give it the exact wording. She just sent it to me. Deputy political leader of the Progressive Empowerment Party, Lima McLeod Wilkinson, sent me this. It is signed. This was signed by Claudel McKellar, acting permanent secretary. The last 2 lines of this: permanent secretaries and heads of departments are reminded that the quasi-safe zone policy in the public sector does not constitute a mandatory vaccination program. So what the hell is it? If you can't work without the vaccine, what is it? This is the catch-22, you know. Remember in the 60s and the 70s, they had a book called Catch-22. You can't be a carpenter unless you're working as a carpenter. You can't get a job as a carpenter unless you're already a carpenter.
Listen, the Ministry of Labor, probably about a little over 2 months ago, would have put out, they have a bi-monthly pull-out that they usually have on the website. And it would have guided employers what they can do and what they cannot do. And they themselves told you that there are no laws in Trinidad and Tobago, except in the situation of the emergency regulation and safe zone, that says to any employer that you could tell a worker that they have to get a vaccine. That's the first thing. This is the Ministry of Labor. And it answers most of the questions for employers who have chosen to go ahead and on their own, take their own risk and do the things that they are doing without good advice, guidelines as to how and what they can do. And maybe they should visit that if they don't want to call a consultant or they don't want to call an attorney who is versed in employment law.
They're spending bad money. Give them that advice now. They're spending bad money. They're spending bad money now. It is the government's policy that the public sector will operate as quasi-safe zones. This is circulated from the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Public Administration to all permanent secretaries and heads of departments. So I'm assuming this is the guidelines of the government's intention. It is the government's policy that the public sector will operate as a quasi-safe zone with effect from January 17, 2022. This means that the operations of organizations within the public sector, ministries, departments, agencies, authorities, corporations, and companies are to be conducted only by employees who have provided proof of having received any of the WHO-approved COVID-19 vaccinations, or employees who have received the appropriate vaccination exemption. Further details on this policy, and in particular the impact on those persons who at the commencement date are only partially vaccinated, will be provided on publication of the relevant regulations. And that is the first page, but the second page ends permanent secretaries and heads of departments are reminded that the quasi-safe zone policy in the public sector does not constitute a mandatory vaccination program. So on the first page, they say that only employees who are vaccinated or who approve vaccination can work in the quasi-safe zone. But on the second page, it says it does not constitute a mandatory vaccination program. So the next show, the follow-up to this show, I am going to have Mandrake the Magician come on the show to explain to me how an unvaccinated employee gets to work because it's not mandatory.
And that is the oxymoronish, nature of most of the sentiments coming out from these government people. Because what they are trying to do, I'm suggesting, is to frighten people or frighten employers without taking the risk of making the workers vaccinated or getting the workers to take the vaccine. Not cognizant or not taking into consideration or carelessly doing it without taking into consideration that those said employers that are doing that are putting themselves at risk.
They're creating a nightmare. They're creating a nightmare for themselves here, But you know what's the problem here, Stephen and Ian? That ultimately, all of the fallout from this will be paid for by taxpayers. Government not at risk or nothing. It is taxpayers' money that's going to be jumping up here again.
Taxpayers and employers.
You mean private sector employers who follow government along this path?
Who decide to take actions without some advice or advice from quacks? Yeah.
Well, then I want to tell you, because I want to thank you for joining me. I want to remind people that on Monday, the 17th of January, D-Day, we will reconstitute this panel. And we'll start this show at 8 p.m. And I will try to have at least one labor lawyer present with us as well, because I think we would have had a lot of experiences on that day. And we will take appearances and guests from the public sector, people to share their experiences. But I want to ask you all, because we have to bring this one to a close. So, Stephen, you were just inferring that making these unilateral decisions, believing that they have cover because of this public health procurement, that may not necessarily be so, and they could be setting themselves up for a lot of losses. I'd like to ask you to include that in your closing, please.
Yes, I'm saying that the government, I want to say that the government may be within their rights to do what they plan to do, using the regulations on the 15th or the 17th. However, it does not necessarily frustrate the employment contract because, as I would have said before, there are remedies. And those remedies may include persons working from home or include settling with the employee in terms of their tenure or something like that. Those who don't want to take the vaccine. And there are other remedies that can be used. So you cannot say that the continuing on with the contract was pointless, impossible, or illegal, which are the three elements that would usually frustrate a contract in common law. The other thing is, for private sector employers who have taken the decision to tell workers that they should not come to work and they should remain home on no pay leave for not wanting to take the vaccine, they too are setting themselves up. And in those cases, I am almost certain that they will pay for every single day that that worker was away from work.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you very much for joining me tonight, Stephen.
Yeah.
I know that you have allayed the fears of our country. Thank you very, very much for that.
Thank you.
Ian Griffith. include for me in your closing.
Right, I don't have so much as a closing comment. I just have one more question again for Mr. Madison on behalf of a lot of people, so really get them to sleep tonight without chamomile tea. It goes back in part to showing up for your job, so you quote unquote have not abandoned your job. Information through, let's say, a form that is submitted to you electronically to include your job status, notwithstanding what you said about it, is it, I believe the employee should respond to that request, as opposed to ignoring the request of the information sent to you electronically to fill out your department, your age, your division, whatever. But what they really want in that form of 8 or 9 questions is the one question, your job status.
You can't choose to answer the question, but it is inconsequential in my opinion, because whatever action you take after getting that information would have implication in relation to everything that I would have said earlier on.
Thank you. I think
Once
a
you
lot
fall
of
in the
them
category,
are dealing with a lot of them are dealing with that situation prior to the 15th or the 17th. It's ongoing right now, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th. That information is being requested at lightning speed from them. So I'm glad you answered that question, because that's what they're contending with today, tomorrow, and the days up to the 15th.
Just to give to both of you and to all of those watching, according to Oxford, quasi means apparently, but not really, seemingly, being partly.
And you chided me for my earlier comment, Mr. Alexander.
Gentlemen, thank you both. Good night. Thanks for joining. And to those of you watching us, to those of you who are with us tonight, we had some massive numbers. I am sure this video is going to be shared virally. Take it as good advice. Take it as under advisement to the employers, especially the employers watching this show tonight. Be guided. There are labor relation experts. There are labor lawyers. Consult somebody. Don't just take Farris's advice. Look what it did to poor Adrian Schoon with the Pelican Brief. To the country of Trinidad and Tobago, no one is saying that there is not a virus. That we are mishandling this virus is clear, and that trying to operate the country by bully and fear is no way to go. We are not going to be party to that. We're not going to sit idly by and let that be a reality. Later on this week, we plan to have public sector workers join us, including Lemma McLeod Wilkinson. She is the deputy political leader of the Progressive Empowerment Party and a senior public servant. We will have others join us as well, and possibly maybe some attorneys to drill down into this. We plan to have a medical panel tomorrow to talk more about the miracle that is monoclonal antibodies. We want to expose that a little bit more, and we discussed that last night. So this whole week, this show is going to be pregnant with pertinent information that you need to be informed, educated, and empowered. It's easy to share and delve into all of the nonsense and the speculation and the conspiracy theories. On this show, we plan to deal with fact, forcefully and very clear, but we are going to deal with fact. We're going to bring you science. Some of the people like the Attorney General and the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health, even if we have to bring them kicking and screaming to the science, we're bringing the science to the public. So we will hear for under 2 hours. It's 10:57:27 in Trinidad and Tobago. I'd like to thank everybody who were with us tonight. I'd like to thank all our sponsors. I need to remember to also add to our list of sponsors for tonight: Trinity Lighting, Western Main Road, St. James. They are the best in lighting. Please feel free to visit Trinity Lighting to get all of your lighting supplies. I want to say thank you again to Ramsarans, who always step up to help us, and Millennium Human Resource Consultants. I would like to also thank Darren's Air Conditioning, who we did not, unfortunately, we could not put up their ad tonight. They are a long-time sponsor. And all of the other supporters and everyone else who go out of their way to make it possible for us to do all the things we do. We thank you all very, very much. To those of you who are not yet on board or helping and you would like to, if you'd like to make a financial contribution to help us take this show literally on the road, you could message me on 682-2110, or you could message our chairman and financial controller, Felicia Holder, 769-4590. Until tomorrow, stay safe, Trinidad and Tobago.